Hello everyone, this is Svetlana. Fall is around the corner and it's so time to start making fall cards. In this video I will show you how to create a simple and bright fall card featuring two different ways of masking. For my card I will be using for all seasons stamp set from Altenew. This is a new set from the August release. It has stamps for all season names in big letters, as well as coordinating sentiments and small images, which can be used to add some small accent for each season. Now Altenew stamp set also have such advanced inserts, where you can find several examples of how this set can be used. For each example there is a list of the main supplies used to create them, and also these designs can be found in an A2 size. You can cut out those examples and easily replicate them, for example by placing into a stamp positioning tool and then placing the corresponding stamps on top. For my card I will be using a MISTI stamping tool. A stamp positioning tool, like any stamp positioning tool, is essential for this technique, since it will involve stamping several times to the same spot. As I will be making a fall card, I will be using this autumn word. And I don't know why I decided to clarify this, as this is kind of obvious. Okay, I have big problems with centering or aligning things. So to position this stamp centered, I'm using this transparent grid, which I printed on a piece of acetate using my laser printer. You can also purchase a similar transparent grid on Simon Says stamp. I want to make this board multicolored, so I will be stamping it using Velvet, Autumn Blaze and Honey Drizzle dye inks from Altenew. I will be inking up and stamping each letter separately. In order to ink up only one letter, I'm masking everything around it using a painter's tape. With such big letters it's very easy to do, and it's very easy to actually see where to apply a painter's tape. Next I'm applying ink onto the letter. Here I have some part of the stamp not covered with the painter's tape, so I'm trying not to touch this part, applying ink onto the letter in question, to prevent stamping this part of the word with incorrect ink. The next very important part of this technique is removing the painter's tape from the stamp before actually stamping. This is very critical and is easy to forget. But if you don't remove it, you will end up stamping with an inked painter's tape, or in other words, ruining your card. Ask me how I know. Now I'm wiping off the letter which I just stamped with, and I also removing an ink residue from the painter's tape, because if you don't do it you can transfer it onto the next ink pad, or maybe even onto the next letter. And now I'm continuing stamping this word in the same manner, so I'm masking off each letter and stamping it with another ink. I really like this technique of masking directly on a stamp. Of course, it's not applicable for any masking need, but if it's clear which part of a stamp to mask off, and it's easy to apply a tape onto this part of a stamp, for example with intricate stamps it can be a bit harder to do, so it's much faster and easier to do such masking than making a paper mask. First of all, you don't need to waste a masking paper and actually spending time on cutting a mask. As soon as you don't forget to remove a tape from a stamp before stamping, you are good. Unfortunately, I ruined many cards forgetting to do it. And you know, of course, this usually happens at the very end when a card is almost ready. Well, I hope after my black PR anyone will still want to try this technique. But as I already mentioned before, sometimes it can be easier to go this way than making a paper mask. Before proceeding to the next step, I need to mask off this stamped word. Doing this with a paper mask is next to impossible, but luckily there is another way to mask off a stamped image using the same stamp, which is covering it with clear embossing. And that's what I am doing now. First I applied a generous amount of baby powder to achieve an orthostatic effect, and prevent embossing powder from sticking in the areas where I don't want it to be. Then I'm stamping over with clear embossing ink from Altenew, adding clear embossing powder and heat setting it. And that's why using a stamp positioning tool is important, as we want to make sure to stamp with the clear embossing ink directly on the top of the stamped image. Next I will be adding some season accents using several small stamps from the same set. I'm mounting them onto the MISTI lid and stamp each one separately using one or another inks which I already used to stamp the autumn board. In the area where the small element overlaps clear embossing, the last resists the ink. I'm blotting it with a paper towel, and then I also carefully wipe it off with a Q-tip. I'm doing this so I won't smear the ink all over the panel. Then I proceed with stamping the other elements. After stamping this group of elements, I'm covering them with clear embossing as well. Here I'm removing embossing powder from the clear embossed letters. It's an optional step, as while heat setting the powder will melt with already existing clear embossing. But it can end up being too noticeable, so I prefer to remove it. Then I've stamped and clear embossed on top some more of these small accents. And that's the point where I started hesitating what to do next. My initial plan was to blend some ink onto the panel, and that's what all that clear embossing was about. But I kinda liked this very clean look as well. Even clear embossing, which initially was meant to be used for this effect, looks logical, so to speak, in this design, as it replicates an after the rain look, which is a common state for fall. You can totally stop at this point too, but I decided to proceed with my initial idea. Although I changed the ink I'm blending onto the panel. I planned to make the panel of a brown or craft color, but ended up using the ocean wave ink. So it was my compromise between the initial idea and the clean look I wanted to stick to. You see me here using a paper towel to hold the panel in place in the area where I already blended some ink. I'm doing this so I won't leave fingerprints on my blending, since Altenew inks are not waterproof and some moist from my hands can actually leave these fingerprints. Then I'm for mounting the panel onto a white card base. And of course, it wouldn't be me if I didn't end up with some defects, which are an ink mark or this blot of stray embossing. I'm hiding them behind enamel dots from Altenew. And I'm adding some more dots around the card to balance them. Actually, enamel dots are obligatory elements for fall cards anyway, so it's all turned out to be good. And that actually finishes off my card. I hope you like this idea and maybe learn something new from it. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!